The city was alive with noise. Cars moved fast, horns echoed, and people rushed in every direction. It was just another ordinary morning. Office workers held their coffee cups, students walked with heavy bags, and shopkeepers opened shutters. Nobody knew that in a few minutes, something would happen that would shock everyone. Among the busy crowd walked a man. His name was Daniel. He looked like any other man. He wore simple clothes, a plain shirt, dark jeans, and old shoes. His face was calm, his steps steady. He carried a small paper bag from a nearby bakery. To anyone watching, he seemed unimportant, just another face in the sea of strangers. But fate had something different planned for him. Daniel stopped at a coffee shop on the corner. The bell rang as he pushed the glass door open. Inside, people chatted quietly. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. He ordered a black coffee, paid in cash, and thanked the barista with a soft smile. Nothing about him looked strange. No one would imagine the police were already watching him. Outside, 2 police cars slowly turned onto the same street. Their engines were low, their blue lights off. The officers inside exchanged serious looks. They had been following Daniel for days. Every move, every step, every place he visited, watched carefully. And today, they were ready to act. Daniel stepped out of the shop with his coffee. He stood for a moment, enjoying the warmth of the cup in his hands. A cool wind brushed against his face. He looked up at the tall buildings, the sky partly cloudy. For him, it was just another ordinary day. For the people around, it was also just another morning. Some sat on benches, some checked their phones, some rushed to work. Life was normal. Then came the sound that broke the calm. Sirens. Loud, sharp, frightening. Everyone turned their heads. 2 police cars stopped near the coffee shop. Doors opened fast, and officers jumped out. They moved with purpose, their boots hitting the pavement hard. "Daniel Carter," one officer shouted. His voice was strong and commanding. The crowd froze. Some gasped, others whispered. Who was this man? Why was the police here? Daniel stood still, confused. His coffee cup shook slightly in his hand. "What?" he asked softly. "Hands where we can see them," another officer ordered. People pulled out their phones, recording the scene. A woman whispered, "He looks so normal. Is he really a criminal?" Daniel raised his hands slowly. "There must be some mistake," he said in a calm but nervous tone. The officers didn't wait. One grabbed his arm, twisted it behind his back. Another snapped cold metal handcuffs around his wrists. The sound of the cuffs locking echoed loudly in the street. The crowd gasped again. Children stared with wide eyes. Old men shook their heads. Some people murmured, "He must have done something terrible." Others whispered, "But he looks innocent." Daniel didn't fight. He didn't shout. He only said one line, clear and calm. "You have the wrong man." But nobody believed him. The officers pushed him toward the police car. The bakery bag fell from his hands, the fresh bread rolling on the dirty pavement. His coffee cup dropped, spilling dark liquid across the sidewalk. The normal morning had turned into chaos. Inside the car, Daniel sat quietly, his hands locked behind him. He looked through the window at the people outside. Their faces were filled with curiosity, judgment, and fear. They were already sure he was guilty. Nobody thought of the possibility that he might be innocent. The police car engine roared. The sirens started again. The crowd stepped back as the car sped away, carrying Daniel into the unknown. But the story was only beginning. Back at the coffee shop, 2 men talked in low voices. "Do you think he is really the one?" the younger man asked. The older man shook his head. "He doesn't look like it." But the police don't arrest someone in broad daylight unless they are sure. Their conversation was like many others happening that moment. People tried to guess who Daniel was. A thief? A murderer? A dangerous criminal hiding in plain sight? Nobody guessed the truth. Nobody imagined the real story behind the wrong man in handcuffs. At the police station, the officers celebrated. "We finally got him," one said. "After all these years," another replied. But Daniel only sat in silence, his eyes calm but filled with something deeper. He knew what was coming. And he knew they were making the biggest mistake of their lives. The ordinary day was over. What followed would change everything. The police car drove fast through the crowded streets. Sirens screamed, lights flashed, and people moved aside. Daniel sat in the back seat, his hands locked tightly in cold steel. His eyes stayed on the road, but his thoughts were racing inside. He whispered again, "You have the wrong man." The officer sitting next to him gave a sharp look. "Save it. We know exactly who you are." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You don't." But his words were ignored. The car stopped in front of the police station. A tall building with heavy doors and gray walls. Officers were already waiting outside. Cameras clicked as reporters tried to capture photos. Microphones reached forward. "Who is he?" one journalist shouted. "Is this the man behind the crimes?" another asked loudly. Daniel stepped out of the car, guided by two officers. Flashlights blinded him. Reporters surrounded them, throwing questions, but no answer came. Police pushed them away and led Daniel inside. The doors closed, shutting the world out. The interrogation room was small and cold. A single table stood in the center, two chairs on each side. A bright white light hung above, making the room feel like a cage. The walls were plain, almost suffocating. Daniel was pushed into the chair. The cuffs stayed on his wrists. After a moment, two detectives entered. One was young, full of energy and anger. The other was older, his face marked with years of experience. The young detective slammed a file on the table. "We finally caught you," he shouted. Daniel looked up, confused. "Caught me for what?" The older detective opened the file calmly. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed a crime scene, dark, violent, terrifying. Blood on the floor, broken glass, chaos everywhere. Daniel's eyes studied the picture. His face didn't change. "What does this have to do with me?" he asked softly. The young detective leaned forward. "Don't play games. We know you were there. We have witnesses, we have evidence. Stop pretending." Daniel shook his head. "I wasn't there. I don't even know this place." Another photo was pushed toward him. This time, it was blurry security footage. A man was seen walking near the crime scene at night. The figure wore a hood, his face hidden in shadows. "Look at this," the young detective demanded. "That's you." Daniel leaned closer. He studied the image carefully. It was unclear, the figure could be anyone. "That's not me," he said firmly. The detectives exchanged looks. The younger one laughed bitterly. "Of course you'll deny it. All criminals deny it at first." The older detective stayed silent, watching Daniel's calm face. There was no fear in his eyes, no panic, no guilt. Only patience, like a man waiting for the truth to appear on its own. Hours passed. The questions didn't stop. "Where were you last night? Who do you work for? Why did you do it?" Each time, Daniel gave the same answer: "You are making a mistake. I am not the man you think I am." The young detective grew frustrated. He slammed his hands on the table. "Enough. Stop lying. We know your name, we know your past, and we know your crimes." Daniel lifted his eyes slowly. His voice was steady, almost calm. "You don't know me at all." Meanwhile, outside the room, more officers gathered. Some believed he was guilty. Some weren't so sure. "He doesn't look like a killer," one officer whispered. "Looks can deceive," another replied. "Evil often hides in plain sight." Still, doubts were spreading. Back inside, the interrogation continued. The older detective finally spoke. His voice was low but strong. "Why should we believe you? Why should we think you are innocent?" Daniel leaned forward. His cuffs clinked on the table. "Because the man you are searching for is still out there," he said. Both detectives froze for a second. The words hung heavy in the air. "What do you mean?" the older one asked carefully. Daniel sighed. "I don't know who he is. But I know it's not me. You are wasting your time while the real danger walks free." The younger detective laughed harshly. "You expect us to believe that?" Daniel's eyes met his. "I don't expect anything. I only speak the truth." The older detective studied Daniel's face for a long moment. Something about him felt different. His calmness, his honesty, his steady eyes. Guilty men usually trembled, sweated, shouted, or broke down. Daniel did none of that. Still, the evidence seemed heavy against him. The file was thick. Photos, reports, witness statements. All pointed to him. But something was not right. Hours later, Daniel was moved to a holding cell. The steel door closed behind him with a loud clang. The cell was empty except for a small bed and a metal sink. The walls were gray, the air cold. He sat on the bed, his back against the wall. From the other side of the bars, an officer muttered, "You should have thought twice before doing what you did." Daniel didn't reply. He only closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Wrong man. Always the wrong man." In another room, the detectives argued. The young detective slammed the file shut. "It's him. Everything matches. We can't let him go." The older detective shook his head. "But look at him. His eyes, they don't lie. I've seen criminals for 30 years. He doesn't fit." "Maybe he's just a good liar," the younger one shot back. "Or maybe," the older detective said slowly, "we've made a mistake." Outside the station, rumors spread fast. News channels reported the arrest. Headlines appeared. "Dangerous criminal caught at last. Police capture mystery man in public. The city finally safe?" People watched the news with mixed feelings. Some felt safer. Others felt uncertain. Many asked the same question, who is he really? No one had the answer. Not yet. In the dark of his cell, Daniel waited. His heart was heavy, but his mind was calm. He knew the truth would come out. He knew one day they would understand who he really was. But for now, he remained the wrong man in handcuffs. And the world believed a lie. The night was long inside the holding cell. The cold air pressed against the walls, and silence filled the corners. Daniel sat on the narrow bed, his hands resting on his lap. His eyes were open, but his mind was far away. He remembered. Not the prison walls. Not the noise of officers outside. He remembered another time, another place. A past he never wanted to speak about again. Many years ago, Daniel was not the quiet man the world now saw. He had lived a very different life. He was once a soldier. Not an ordinary one. He had served in places most people never even heard about. Remote towns, dangerous borders, war zones where every breath could be the last. He had seen fire, smoke, and blood. He had seen men break down, and he had seen men rise with courage. Daniel was one of those who rose. But he never wanted to be known as a hero. He only wanted to do his duty, protect those who could not protect themselves, and then disappear quietly. His memories were sharp. He remembered standing in the middle of a burning village. Children crying, women screaming, smoke rising from broken houses. Armed men had attacked without mercy. Daniel, young and strong, had led his small unit to fight back. He had carried a little girl on his shoulders, running through fire to bring her to safety. He had pulled an injured comrade from the ground, refusing to leave him behind. That day, many lives were saved. But Daniel never spoke of it. The newspapers never wrote his name. The people never knew his face. He had chosen silence. Because for him, it was never about glory. It was about humanity. But silence had a price. When he returned from service, he carried invisible scars. He lived a quiet life, moving from place to place. No one knew his story. To neighbors, he was just Daniel, a simple man with calm eyes and a gentle smile. But inside, he carried the weight of all he had seen. And now, in the cell, the past was returning to him. Meanwhile, in the station, the older detective sat alone with Daniel's file. He opened the folder again and stared at the photos. Something didn't fit. He leaned back in his chair and whispered, "Who are you really, Daniel?" He decided to dig deeper. He searched old records, old databases, anything that could tell more about this man they had arrested. Hours passed. He found something strange. Daniel's background was almost empty. No criminal record. No complaints. No history of violence. His life looked too clean, too perfect, almost like a shadow. Then the detective found one hidden line in an old government file. Classified. Restricted. Red letters covered the page. He frowned. Why would an ordinary man have such a file? Back in his cell, Daniel whispered to himself, "They think I am guilty, but they don't know the truth. They don't know what I left behind." He leaned against the wall, and another memory came. It was the night he walked away from his unit. The war was over, but the cost was heavy. Too many had died. Too many secrets were buried. Daniel had decided he had seen enough. He wanted peace. He wanted to live quietly, far from guns and blood. So, he left. No medals. No recognition. Only silence. For years, he lived as an ordinary man. He worked small jobs, helped neighbors, kept to himself. Nobody asked, and he never told. But fate has a way of pulling the past back to the present. And now, that past was knocking on his door again, in the form of false handcuffs. The older detective returned to the interrogation room the next morning. He sat across from Daniel. "You are not who you say you are," the detective said slowly. Daniel looked at him, silent. The detective pushed the classified file across the table. "I found something. You've been hiding." "Why?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because I don't want to be known." "Why?" Daniel finally spoke, his voice low. "Because the world doesn't need another soldier. The world needs people who live in peace." The detective studied him. He felt something shift inside. This man was not like the others he had interrogated. His calmness came from a different place: experience, pain, sacrifice. But he still asked, "Then why are people saying you are the criminal we've been searching for?" Daniel leaned back. "Because sometimes the world chooses the wrong man. And I happen to be that man." Outside the room, the younger detective grew angry. He didn't trust Daniel's calm words. "He's lying," he told his colleagues. "He's playing with us." But doubt was growing among the officers. Some remembered stories of an unknown soldier who once saved lives in distant lands. Could Daniel be the same man? No one was sure. That night, Daniel's memories haunted him again. He remembered the faces of those he had saved. The tears of the little girl he carried through fire. The grateful eyes of the soldier he pulled from the battlefield. He remembered one man in particular, an officer badly wounded, almost gone, but Daniel had refused to leave him. He had carried him on his back for miles, through danger, until they reached safety. That man had survived. Daniel wondered if he was still alive today. And he wondered if destiny would bring them face to face again. The city outside didn't know any of this. They only saw the headlines. They only saw the handcuffs. But inside the police station, the truth was starting to whisper through the cracks. Daniel was not just a suspect. He was a man with a hidden past. A past too big, too deep, too important to remain buried forever. And soon, that past would be revealed. The wrong man in handcuffs was not wrong in the way people thought. He was wrong because the world had forgotten who he truly was. And the moment of revelation was coming closer. The station was quieter than usual. Officers walked through the hallways with heavy steps, their voices low. Everyone felt that something about the man in the holding cell was not normal. He was too calm, too patient, too different. Daniel sat inside, his back against the cold wall. He had not touched the food they gave him. He only sat in silence, his mind somewhere far away. His eyes did not carry the fear of a guilty man. Instead, they carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. The younger detective stormed into the chief's office. His face was red with anger. "This is wasting time," he shouted. "We have the evidence, the photos, the witnesses. He's our guy. Why is everyone suddenly doubting?" The chief raised a hand. "Lower your voice." The older detective spoke calmly. "Because something doesn't add up. I've interrogated criminals my whole career. He doesn't act like them. He doesn't even defend himself like them. He just waits." "Exactly," the young detective snapped. "He's playing mind games. That's what liars do." The chief looked at both of them. "Then let's settle this. Bring him back to the room. We'll push harder." Daniel was led once again into the interrogation room. The cuffs still cut into his wrists. The bright light above burned into his eyes. The young detective threw a folder on the table. "Enough of your silence. Tell us the truth. Who are you really?" Daniel looked at the folder, then at the detective. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "The truth is something you are not ready for." The detective slammed his hand on the table. "Stop this nonsense." But before Daniel could answer, the door opened. Everyone turned. An old man stepped in. His hair was gray, his uniform decorated with medals, his steps heavy but steady. The room went silent. Officers outside straightened as he passed. This was not just any man. This was a senior officer, respected, decorated, and known by all. The young detective frowned. "General Harris? What are you doing here?" The general didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Daniel. He walked closer, slowly, like a man seeing a ghost. Daniel looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, time froze. The general's face went pale. His lips parted slightly as if words had been stolen from him. His hands trembled. "It can't be," he whispered. The younger detective looked confused. "What? Do you know him?" The general stepped closer. His voice shook. "Know him? He saved my life." The room went silent. The younger detective blinked in shock. "What are you talking about?" The general's eyes never left Daniel. Memories flooded back into his mind, the battlefield, the fire, the pain, the night he thought his life was over. "I remember," the general said softly. "I was left behind, bleeding, unable to move. Everyone thought I was gone. But this man carried me for miles. Through fire, through bullets, through hell itself. He refused to leave me. Because of him, I am alive today." Gasps echoed in the room. The younger detective stepped back. His mouth opened but no words came out. The older detective leaned forward. "You're saying, this is the soldier? The one from the forgotten operation?" The general nodded slowly. His eyes filled with emotion. "Yes. This is him. I will never forget his face." He turned to the others, his voice firm now. "You have arrested the wrong man." Silence filled the room. Everyone stared at Daniel with new eyes. Daniel remained calm, his face unchanged. Only his eyes showed a flicker of sadness. "I told you," he said softly. "You have the wrong man." The young detective swallowed hard. His confidence melted away. All the certainty he had carried now felt like sand slipping through his fingers. The older detective closed his file slowly. His doubts had been right all along. The general pulled out a chair and sat across from Daniel. "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" Daniel looked at him quietly. Then he sighed. "Because I didn't want the world to remember me. I chose silence. I chose peace." "But the world needs to know the truth," the general said firmly. Daniel shook his head. "The world doesn't need another name to worship. The world needs people who do the right thing without expecting anything back." The general's eyes softened. He understood. Outside the interrogation room, whispers spread quickly. Officers who had once looked at Daniel with suspicion now stared with respect. Some even with guilt. "Is it true?" one whispered. "He saved the general," another asked. "Yes," came the reply. "And we treated him like a criminal." Shame settled over them. The chief entered the room, his face serious. He looked at Daniel, then at the general. "General Harris," he said, "are you certain?" The general stood tall. "I would bet my life on it. I owe my life to this man. He is no criminal." The chief turned to Daniel. His voice softened. "Mr. Carter." "I'm sorry." Daniel gave a small nod. "I am used to it. The world has always misunderstood me." The younger detective sat in silence, his head lowered. His arrogance had vanished. For the first time, he saw the weight of his mistake. I was wrong," he whispered. Daniel looked at him. "Don't be sorry for doubting me. Be sorry for doubting the truth when it stands before you." The words cut deep, and the detective had no reply. That night, Daniel sat alone in his cell, though the door was unlocked. No one forced him to stay. They knew he was innocent now. They knew he was more than innocent, he was a forgotten hero. But Daniel did not rush out. He sat quietly, staring at the dark wall. Because for him, freedom was not about doors or locks. Freedom was about being invisible. The general visited him once more before leaving. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said gently. Daniel smiled faintly. "Hiding is not a burden if it means peace." The general placed a hand on his shoulder. "You may not want the world to know you. But the world will never forget you." And with that, the truth had finally surfaced. The wrong man in handcuffs was not wrong because he was guilty. He was wrong because the world had mistaken a savior for a suspect. And the police, who once celebrated his capture, now stood stunned by who he really was. The big reveal had changed everything. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The night outside the station was silent, but inside, every heart was restless. The news of the big reveal had spread like wildfire. Officers whispered in the hallways, journalists waited outside, and in the interrogation room, the truth was ready to rise from the shadows. Daniel sat quietly, his cuffs finally removed. The cold marks were still on his wrists, but he didn't rub them. His calm face showed no anger, no frustration. Only acceptance. The chief entered with the older detective and General Harris. Behind them came a few other senior officers. The room was heavy with tension, but also with curiosity. Everyone wanted to know. Who was Daniel Carter? The chief began, his voice low but respectful. "Mr. Carter, no, Daniel, we owe you an apology. But we also need to understand. Who are you really?" Daniel looked at the table for a moment before raising his eyes. His voice was steady, simple. "I am no one important. I was once a soldier. That is all." The younger detective, who had once shouted at him, now spoke carefully. "But not just any soldier, right? The general said you saved his life." Daniel sighed. "I didn't save him for glory. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. That night, when everyone thought he would die, I couldn't leave him behind. I carried him through fire and bullets. Not because of orders. Not because of medals. but because I couldn't let another man die alone." The room was silent. His words cut deeper than any loud confession. The older detective leaned forward. "Why didn't you stay in the army? You could have been honored. Respected." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I didn't want honor. I didn't want respect. I wanted peace. When the war ended, I walked away. I wanted to live quietly, where no one knew my name. I wanted to bury the past." General Harris's eyes softened. "But the past has a way of finding us." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Yes. And now, here I am, in handcuffs for a crime I didn't commit." The chief opened the file that had once condemned Daniel. He looked at the photos, the blurry footage, the witness statements. "If not you, then who?" "We were so sure." Daniel's eyes grew serious. "That is what I've been trying to tell you. The man you are hunting is still out there. And while you wasted your time on me, he is free." The officers exchanged uneasy looks. They realized the weight of their mistake. General Harris spoke firmly. "You must clear his name immediately." The chief nodded. "Of course. But we need to know more. Daniel, can you help us find the real man?" Daniel looked down. He didn't answer immediately. His fingers touched the edge of the table, his mind deep in thought. Finally, he said, "I am not a hunter anymore. I am tired of chasing shadows. But if my silence has brought you to arrest the wrong man, then maybe I must speak." He leaned back, his voice steady. "The truth is, I know nothing about this criminal. But I know the kind of man he must be. Someone who hides in plain sight. Someone who lets others take the blame. Someone who is dangerous not because of strength, but because of his lies. That is the man you should fear." The officers listened carefully. His words carried the weight of experience. The younger detective, ashamed but honest now, spoke quietly. "We judged you too quickly. I judged you. I saw what I wanted to see, not the truth." Daniel's eyes met his. "The world is quick to judge. But judgment without truth is dangerous." The detective lowered his head. "You're right." Outside the interrogation room, officers gathered at the glass window, watching. Many of them felt guilty. They had laughed when Daniel was first brought in. They had called him names. Some had even bet on how long it would take for him to confess. Now they realized they had mocked a man who had once carried lives on his shoulders. A forgotten hero. General Harris stood and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "The world may not know your name, but I will never forget. You saved me when no one else would. That debt can never be repaid." Daniel gave a faint smile. "I never saved you for a debt. I saved you because it was right." The general's eyes shone with respect. "And that is why men like you are rare. You are not forgotten, Daniel. Not to me." The chief turned to the officers in the room. His voice was sharp, commanding. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. We nearly destroyed an innocent man because we were too eager to believe what we wanted. Never again." The younger detective nodded, his face pale. "Never again." For the first time since his arrest, Daniel stood freely. The weight of the cuffs was gone, but the weight of memory remained. He stretched his hands slowly, as if testing freedom again. An officer whispered, "He doesn't even look angry." "If it were me, I'd be shouting at everyone." Another replied softly, "That's the difference. Heroes don't need to shout. Their silence speaks louder." Reporters outside grew impatient. They shouted questions as soon as the doors opened. "Is it true he's innocent? Who is he? Why was he arrested?" But the officers said nothing. Daniel walked past them silently. His face calm, his steps steady. The flashes of cameras lit up the night, but he didn't look at them. He had no interest in fame, no interest in proving himself to the world. He only wanted to disappear again. Yet the truth had already come out. Inside the station, the officers knew they had witnessed something unforgettable. They had looked into the eyes of a man who carried scars the world would never see. And they had learned a lesson: not every man in handcuffs is guilty. Sometimes, the real story is hidden deep beneath silence. That night, Daniel left the station. The city was quiet, the streets empty. He walked slowly, the cool air brushing against his face. He was free again, but freedom felt heavy. Because he knew that once the truth comes out, it can never be hidden again. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance as Daniel walked alone. His footsteps echoed against the empty street. To the people outside the police station, he was no longer just the suspect. He was now something else, an unsolved mystery, a man whose truth had shaken even the strongest officers. But Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He only felt tired. Inside the station, silence still hung in the air. Officers sat at their desks, but no one spoke loudly. The memory of Daniel's calm words and the general's testimony lingered in their minds. The younger detective sat with his head in his hands. Shame burned inside him. He had been so certain, so loud, so quick to call Daniel a liar. And yet, Daniel never once raised his voice, never once cursed. The older detective placed a hand on his shoulder. "We were wrong. But mistakes can teach us. Remember this day." The younger detective nodded slowly. "I will. I'll never forget his eyes, the way he looked at us, even after we chained him like a criminal. No hate. No anger. Just truth." General Harris stood at the doorway, watching the night. His mind returned again and again to the battlefield years ago, the smoke, the blood, the pain. He remembered the moment he thought death had come for him. And he remembered the arms that lifted him, the voice that refused to leave him behind. "Not today," Daniel had whispered back then. "Not while I'm still breathing." And tonight, in that interrogation room, the general had felt the same force again, the strength of a man who never sought recognition, only righteousness. Meanwhile, Daniel reached a small park. The benches were empty, the trees silent under the moonlight. He sat down, letting the cool wind touch his face. For the first time since the arrest, he allowed himself to breathe deeply. He whispered to himself, "The wrong man in handcuffs, maybe that's who I will always be. Misunderstood. Mistaken. But if the truth helped someone tonight, then it was worth it." He closed his eyes. And once again, memories returned, not of war, not of blood, but of the small moments of kindness he had given. The smile of the little girl he had saved. The grateful tears of families he had protected. The quiet thank you from a soldier who thought he wouldn't live to see another sunrise. These were the treasures Daniel carried. Not medals. Not honors. But memories of lives touched by his unseen hands. Back at the station, the chief gathered his officers. His voice was firm, heavy with emotion. "Let tonight be written in our minds forever. We almost destroyed an innocent man. Not just an innocent man, a man who once gave everything for others. We must never forget that the world is not always what it seems. Justice is not about rushing to judgment. It is about listening, watching, and understanding." The officers nodded. Some bowed their heads in guilt. Others clenched their fists, promising themselves they would never repeat such a mistake. Reporters outside still begged for answers. Who was he? Why was he arrested? Is he really a hero? But the officers gave no details. They only said one line. "We arrested the wrong man." And that was enough to send shockwaves through the city. Later that night, the younger detective stepped out alone. He found Daniel still sitting at the park bench, staring at the sky. Slowly, he approached. Daniel noticed him but didn't move. The detective spoke softly. "I came to say sorry. Not as an officer, but as a man who judged you unfairly." Daniel looked at him, his eyes calm. "I told you, don't be sorry for doubting me. Be sorry for doubting the truth." The detective nodded, his throat tight. "You're right. And I'll carry this lesson with me for the rest of my life. Daniel gave a faint smile. Good. Then my arrest was not wasted. If it made even one man understand, then it was worth it. Tears almost touched the detective's eyes. He had seen many criminals, many liars, many broken men, but never someone like this. Who are you, really? He whispered. Daniel stood slowly, looking up at the stars. His answer was simple. I am no one. Just a man who tried to do what was right. The detective watched him walk away, his figure fading into the shadows. And for the first time, he understood that true greatness never shouts. It whispers quietly, leaving marks on hearts rather than on walls. Days later, the story of the wrong man in handcuffs continued to spread. People argued, people wondered, but no one truly knew the whole truth. Some believed he was a war hero. Some believed he was just a victim of mistaken identity. And some believed he was something more, someone who lived between legend and reality. But Daniel did not care. He had vanished once again, into the quiet life he had always chosen. He left no name, no proof, no address. Only a memory in the hearts of those who had seen him, the officers, the general, the people on the street who had watched him taken away in cuffs. For them, he would never be forgotten. General Harris, speaking privately to his officers, summed it up in one sentence. Not all heroes wear medals. Some simply walk among us, unknown, until fate forces us to see them. And so, the story closed. A man once mistaken for a criminal walked free. A man once hidden by silence was revealed. And the lesson remained. Never judge too quickly. Sometimes the stranger in front of you carries a story greater than you can imagine. The wrong man in handcuffs was never wrong in his actions, only in how the world saw him. And from that day forward, he became unforgettable.